Hello everybody, I'm Matt Anderson and welcome to The Road Not Taken, how ordinary people got out of their own way and you can too. I'm excited to introduce our guest for today's show, Kelly Clements. And Kelly, if you'd like to say just a few words to the listeners by means of introduction.
Sure. Hello everybody, my name is Kelly and I am a coach for entrepreneurs and their spouses. I've been working with entrepreneurs since about 2004 when I started with Strategic Coach. And I learned way back then that a spouse played a really vital role in the business. And so I've had a lot of attention on harmonizing the marriage and the business. I have a lot of attention and focus on the intersection of work and family. And my specialty is really helping both people step into their extraordinary. I believe it takes two extraordinary people to create one extraordinary relationship. And that's why I started involving the coach or the spouse in my coaching.
It's funny. I know I need to jump in and ask you a question to sort of get the show rolling, but I remember a few years back when I first was introduced or about you, and the person, well, John Nichols, who I already interviewed on this podcast, but he said something in his email about Kelly's come up with something really unique in the coaching she does. And my first reaction was, what could possibly be unique at this point about coaching? And I didn't really believe him until we met, and then the light bulb went on and I just thought, oh my goodness me, and I couldn't believe the thought had never crossed my mind either. But it's everyone talks about the person being coached, but they never talk about the most intimate key relationship, and I just thought, oh my gosh, what a genius idea. So just wanted to bring that up because I just thought and it made me laugh at my own silly mistake. So, but to kick things off, I mean, I was just like, it's always just good for me to get to know you better, and also hear a bit about your own background story. Obviously, there's a reason why you're doing what you're doing. So what was your sort of turning point? In terms of what prompted you to most want to get out of your own way? At a certain point in your life when it perhaps hit its often lowest point.
Yeah. I think, for me, it was very personal, and obviously I have a passion for coaching entrepreneurs, and I've spent so much time in that world that I had a natural appreciation and respect for the entrepreneur and his or her journey. And after my divorce, I, very ambitious, driven alpha female, and after my divorce, I wanted a man who was equally as ambitious, equally as driven. Mm-hmm. And so in that relationship, I had everything that you would need for a foundation of a healthy relationship: admiration, respect, appreciation, trust, all of those things. And about 5 or 6 years into the relationship, he looked at me one day and he was like, "Where's Kelly? Like, where's that woman who could walk into the room and light it up just by being Kelly? Like, where did she go?" And I was like, "Yep, she's laying on the floor waiting for the crumbs of your attention to fall." And I had, in that moment, understood that I had lost myself in the gravitational pull of him and his business. And I didn't take care of myself. I wasn't paying attention to my own needs and desires. And, I think that whole two become one notion can be really dangerous if we lose sight of our own personal identity. And I thought it was me. And then I was still involved in a coaching capacity. I was working with a lot of entrepreneurs and couples in a program called Lifebook. Mm-hmm. So I got, for the first time ever in my career, I got to be not only behind closed doors with the entrepreneur, but I got to spend time with their spouses. And there was one workshop in particular. It was a 4-day workshop. And day one was a really vibrant conversation, engaging breakthroughs, really healthy dynamics within the group. And on day 2, by lunchtime, all of the spouses, which in this particular group happened to be women, were all silent by lunch. And for the women in the room to be the quiet group, like something was going on. Mm-hmm. And so I stopped them during the workshop and I said, "What happened? Like, is there conflict in the room? Have I offended someone? Has something happened? Like, the dynamic has shifted." And it was silent. And I said, "I have 2.5 more days. I can wait, but something has changed and we need to fix what's happening here." And finally, one woman raised her hand and she goes, "Kelly, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to think about my life. I don't know how to answer these questions. I've never thought about these things before. And quite frankly, I don't even feel like it matters, because where is more passion and purpose going to fit? Like, what am I going to go get a job now?" And I looked around the room and every other spouse was either nodding or crying. And that's when I realized that I wasn't alone. It wasn't just me that lost myself. I was in a room with other really smart, intelligent, just vivacious women that had gotten lost in the pull of lost in the gravitational pull of that journey. And that's when I realized, of course, because entrepreneurs, to your point, there's entrepreneurial coaches everywhere. Like, it's not a unique thing. There's podcasts and books and blogs and workshops and seminars and retreats. Like, there is so much support and so many resources for entrepreneurs that we're always learning and growing, right? We're always getting exposed. We're always getting expanded. And if the spouse isn't engaged in the same capacity, that gap only widens. So, of course, there's a disconnect. Of course, the spouse feels intimidated to go and think about her life or set goals with a partner who's so skilled in this particular arena. And so I first started working with just the spouses and having just a private container for them to sit and do the work and have the conversations together. And the more advanced the spouse got, then we wanted to start including the entrepreneur. And so it kind of became this ebb and flow of business coaching, and then just focusing on the spouse, to now there's this really great balance of, and that's what I call it, the intersection of everything that happens at work and home. So that's how I got to where I am.
I mean, there's several different questions that pop to mind from that story, and I'm going to start with you, because I think it would be easy not to ask you about your own, I guess, how you were able to sort of get beyond that, because you said you had your own aha moment during that workshop. So I'll start with you, because it'd be easy, it'd be too comfortable not to, in a way, and I don't want to do that. So how did you then make progress in your own life from that day, or changes from that day?
Yep. It wasn't a gradual thing. I think once you have that breakthrough, it becomes pretty intolerable to start to make gradual changes. It's when I started writing my own program. So up until that point, I was more involved in helping my partner in his business and, working with his team members and his clients. I had a lot of energy on his business. And in that breakthrough, I got to work right away. I'm not going to be writing the proposals. I'm not going to be helping the team. I am going to be writing my own program. And he was really good at holding me accountable. There are times he's like, we're not going out. Like, we're not leaving until this chapter is done. So he really helped to hold me accountable to make sure it was done. And I just started investing more time, more energy, more resources into my own business than his. And it was hard. There was a lot of uncertainty, and it was something that I experienced also when I started talking to other people about this. There was like this, well, what's going to happen? Is she going to be less available to me? Is she going to be, are we not going to have the same freedom that we enjoy in our lifestyle because she's going to be committed to other things? Like, there were some big conversations, and the undercurrent of all of it all the time was, I want her back. I want that woman who can dance in the kitchen and sing in the car. Like, I want her feeling alive again. There's going to be a transition, and a lot of times there can be a degree of fear wrapped around change. And I always remind people that it's not change that we fear. We love change. We love losing weight or earning more money or new houses. Like, change is a really attractive thing to us. But what we fear is the transition. We fear the small steps that have to get us to losing the weight or earning more income or building the house that we're going to get into. And so, when I talk about how the transition, the purpose of having a coach for this transition is to reduce some of that complexity and to reduce some of the uncertainty that comes along with the transition to get to extraordinary people.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's so funny in situations like this, because of course we're having a conversation about it, and part of me wants to just go away and sort of contemplate what you just said about transition, because I'm thinking, wait a second, that's something I don't know if I've really heard before. Because when you started saying about how people fear change, I think most people most people do. I know it's dichotomous in that there's certain things when we want change. I mean, everybody at times needs and wants change, but then I think more often we're creatures of habit and resist it to our own detriment. But I absolutely love your, well, I have to use the expression paradigm shift, but your different way of looking at it, or to see it in an empowering way, as if to say, well, actually the pain isn't from the great results you get at the end. The pain or the challenge is in making the small shifts to get there. And in fact, I'm immediately reminded of, I mean, it's an anecdotal example, but within my family, we're looking to move house, and so and since it's not selling at the moment, we're looking at remodeling, which probably means moving out and living in an apartment in a flat for several months. That's the piece that we're dreading, because it's going to be difficult, right? So it's easy then for us to procrastinate on the other stuff because we're thinking about, not the nice house at the end of the day, but the inconvenience and change that's makes it more difficult. So anyways, it's a fascinating concept. This is probably an aside, but I'm still curious, and it's okay, I mean, be honest, but when you were giving that workshop and on day 2, I am curious, were you able in any way to sort of save the day, or at least, how did you address it on the spot? Because I'm assuming you didn't have materials on hand to sort of say, oh, well, funny you should mention that, so were you able in any way to help the women in the audience that day, or was it just a painful learning experience?
No, it was so heartfelt, because we were all coming from a place of total honesty, right? And because I had been through it, I think, there was some divine intervention that I had been through it, and I had I could see through the same lens. And so I got to give them language to use, like, you know what? I know it doesn't feel like you should have any problems. It doesn't feel like you have any reason to complain. And it probably feels like you have to qualify any pain that you might be experiencing, because you do have a great life. You have a big life, and you have a life that a lot of us dream about. And so it can feel like, who are we to complain? And the fact is that we have a great life, and part of the creation of that great life was that we had to sacrifice maybe some of our own dreams, some of our own desires, ambitions, capacities to support this life. And anytime there's a disconnect from what we're doing in our day-to-day lives and what is really stirring around somewhere in our heart and soul, even if you don't know specifically what that is, of course there's a pain. Of course there's a feeling of a void that comes up. And the mistake is that we assign that feeling that something's missing, or we assign that void to our partner. And that's what I was doing. I was more than happy to support him and help him in the business, and I was more than happy to be in the relationship with him in exchange for making him solely responsible for all of my happiness. And that's unfair to put on anyone. And so I see a lot of women doing that too. Like, and it's not women. I see a lot of people, when they feel a void or a disconnect within themselves, it's easy to assign it to a relationship. And the power comes from realizing that our relationships are such powerful mirrors, that our romantic relationships are the most powerful, clear, transparent mirror that we have in our life. And so just like if you were to walk into a mirror in your bathroom and see that you had food in your face, you wouldn't reach to the mirror and scratch it off on the mirror. You'd work on yourself. And so the same is true with relationships. Like, when there is a feeling of a void or a disconnect, it's really helping them get lined back up with their own desires and helping them find a capacity to be an expression of that. And that's where the foundation of it takes 2 extraordinary people to create one extraordinary relationship comes from. So
what's the most effective way for you to help a couple? In other words, I'm almost thinking in chronological order, because it sounds like your focus is on the entrepreneur's spouse to start with. Correct me if I'm wrong here, and kind of bring them into the picture fully, or into the, get them on track, I guess, and more on purpose. And then there's the relationship itself that they have with their spouse to work on. So can you just sort of talk us through, I don't know, you either tell us a story about a couple you work with, maybe that would be easier to kind of give us an example. But I'm trying to picture sort of how you how you do it. In other words, in terms of how you allocate time with this. Is it through,
Sure.
and I know, because I know you offer workshops and coaching and so on, but what's the best way for you to have the biggest impact?
Yep. Most of my clients come, I do a lot of work with like YPO, EO, Vistage. So most of my clients come from hearing me speak at an event or a retreat.
Mm-hmm.
So generally one person, whether it's the spouse or the entrepreneur, has heard my keynote, and they get a good feel for my flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go home and they tell their partner, like, I really want to work with this girl. I met this girl. I think we should do a phone call. So we'll get on a preliminary exploratory discovery call.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we start together. But my rhythm is so we talk weekly, and I speak to partner 1 and partner 2 individually for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So week 1, I talk to both people individually. Week 2, I talk to both people individually. Week 3, I talk to both people individually. And in those individual calls, we're focused on them. What are they working through? What are their desires? I have a lot of attention on desires. I know that our desires are the leading edge. So really stirring up what's in the soul and what their truest desires are. And then on the 4th week, so all of my coaching packages are quarterly. So then every 4th week, 1 call a month is a couples call where we talk about what's working, what's not, and what's next. And that's a way to bring some of our personal growth into the relationship. But I have so much attention on who they are as individuals first, because I want both people showing up to the relationship authentically. And then on our monthly couples call, that's where we do the work of anything that might still be sliding in somewhere subconsciously, whether it's the passive aggressive eye rolls or anything that might still be floating on under the surface. And then also having so much attention on what they want to co-create together. The difference between coaching and counseling is that marriage counseling has a lot of focus on wounds of the past and some of the pain points. And coaching is great because it's a great modality to build a bigger future together. And that's really where I'm going with my couples, is to get them to co-create a bigger future together. Mm-hmm. And so coaching is a modality that we have a lot of attention on desire and pleasure and what's working, and it's not quite so painful. We're not always picking the wounds, because everyone that comes to me has a story to varying degrees. Like I've heard a lot, and I think that's one of the other reasons of why I do this is coaching offers a clean slate, and I've seen really, really amazing marriages come back from some pretty treacherous scenarios. And so when I hold that light for them and hold the positive expectancy that they can co-create whatever they want to out of whatever they've been through is, I think, really refreshing to a lot of my clients.
When you talk about desires, or what you said you start out by asking each person what their desires are. Well, do you ask each person the same? Do you cover the same areas? And the reason I ask that is in the sense of when you bring couples together, it just occurred to me that if one of them, I don't know, maybe this doesn't happen, one of them's concerned about their health and the other one's concerned about their business, it sounds like it sounds like it's possible where you'd end up talking to them about completely different things and then bring them together where there actually isn't a common ground yet. So can you kind of connect dots as to what I'm missing there, or how you direct those conversations to basically to bring them together so they are working on some of the same things? Or maybe they're Absolutely. Not.
No, that's very accurate. There's one person that has a lot of attention on, to your point, the health or the kids or social situations, and one person's more focused on the business or finance or something else. And they both get to be right. Whatever's taking up the attention in their head is what we focus on. When we do our monthly calls, it's really as it relates to the relationship. How are we communicating together? Where are expectations aligned? How are we managing the schedule? Is our time and our resources being governed by other people's expectations? So are we living in a space of obligation and commitment, or are we living in a space of total co-creation where we're doing what we want and we're spending our resources and our time on the things that we want to together, where we get to live in expression instead of obligation. And it's shedding light on both people's desires. Like maybe we spend a lot of time with this person's friends or family or social circle, and we want to start carving out some more time with this person's relationships. Pace is a big thing. How we spend our time away from work. Like maybe one person just wants to chill out and relax, and one person wants to go skydiving and have a really fast pace on their time off. So we spend a lot of time on how to really make sure their time away from work is as rejuvenating as their time in work. And the reason I have so much attention on that is, when we think about our dating relationship and what got us to the altar, it was play. It was a sense of total enjoyment. It was pleasure. It was talking about the bigger future and all the things we would do someday together, and all of those conversations created an alignment that got us to the altar with this person. And then we had a house and the dog and the businesses and the kids and, whatever else comes with that lifestyle. And pretty soon our free leisure time, like that sense of play, gets squeezed out the window. And that's where love grows. So of course we get, feeling that like we're in a rut or there's no time for us because we're in that sense of obligation all of the time. And so when I talk about making sure that their time away from work is truly enjoyable, it's so that we can sustain that sense of love and connection and play and recreation. Look at that word, recreation, recreation. It's a really, really powerful vehicle to sustain that sense of connection in our relationships. And when I have people really look at the function of our free leisure time as a way to protect the relationship, more than just, put down your phone and have attention to each other, like go out and play together, use your hands together, build something together, be in action together. Because dinner and a movie is great, but what do we end up talking about? The kids. The house and the kids, right? Exactly. Exactly.
Just might have been there. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I want to come back to play. I'd like to carry on with play. However, I don't want to overlook, I'll use the word reality. Maybe I shouldn't, but I think there are, many relationships or some relationships where, there are significant challenges. And my first question is, do you ever send people to therapy first?
I haven't yet. And I have had people come like in the throes of infidelity, loss of job, some pretty specific legal challenges, some pretty significant family dynamics as it relates to stepkids and ex-wives. And so I have connected with people in the midst of some pretty intense challenges. And I think one of the reasons they take the route of coaching over counseling is because of my philosophy with the blank slate and hashing through it. And what do we want to create out of this? Like, yes, we're going to talk about what led to it, red flags, ignoring boundaries, all of those things on an individual level. All of them have come out successfully. All of them are through it. All of them are in rebuilding, if not totally on the other side of it, and have the phoenix from the ashes story. And I can't think of a scenario where I even really ever questioned it. There are some people who have been doing therapy or counseling parallel to me.
I was going to ask
but nothing.
That. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's several reasons why I'm thinking about that topic. One of them is, I've interviewed people for this podcast that have been through serious trauma. Abuse as children, and it's perhaps the most common one, but others that come to mind as well. And I suppose it's interesting, perhaps one of the only reasons I might be asking is because I've been coaching for 17 years, and I too was very drawn to the concept that people were moving forward on their lives. They weren't just digging up the past,
right.
Possibly to no avail. But I think in more recent years, I've had different exposure to therapy, and I've met other people where it really did help them come up with, they needed to process some of that, and they needed some more foundational coping strategies.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm bringing it up, because one of the things that perhaps at this point in my life, I would say it actually bothers me a little bit, it does bother me, is that almost every self-help book I've read and personal development book, most of them don't even mention therapy. They don't even acknowledge it exists. And it seems like there's these two separate worlds that somehow they shouldn't commingle, or they don't belong. And so I guess part of what I'm just exploring is it simply a philosophy that you choose to say, I just think this is a much more effective, positive way to move forwards? That's kind of why I'm asking. But I'm also acknowledging now that I've met people that it was a critical step for them to actually accomplish remarkable things. I'm not saying it certainly wasn't the only one, but I think for some people it got them turned around. That's kind of what I'm bringing up. And so I want to ask you for your opinion on it, really, and your own philosophy on where on how that all blends together.
Yeah, no, I'm huge advocate for it. I would never discourage anyone from pursuing it if they felt like that was the right path for them. And that's why I think it's important to draw that distinction. Like, if you feel like you really need to hash this out and go through old wounds and there's deeper underlying things, by all means, yes, go to therapy. Mm-hmm. And to my point, sometimes my clients are going through therapy and coaching together. Mm-hmm. And it's managing expectations of my clients. Like, the purpose of a coach is we're looking forward. So if you feel like you want to look back, like, that's not where we're going to be. Mm-hmm. And one couple that's coming to mind had like a really bad taste in their mouth from a particular therapist that they went through in their first marriage, and then they swore off therapy never again because they had one bad experience. And so we did have the conversation that therapy with one partner doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same situation. And that sometimes, one of the reasons we resist therapy is we don't want to look at the past. And I always offer, if there's something there that you don't want to look at, there's a good chance that that's where your shame is growing. Mm-hmm. Because shame thrives in isolation. And if you're avoiding it from a place of shame, know that no matter what degree of coaching we do, we're only going to be able to get so far if you don't address whatever's stirring for you in the background that you don't want to talk about.
So I've got to stop you there. So then, are you saying that you have some exercises that you'll have clients do to kind of process things from the past, especially repeat behaviors or very limiting beliefs, because they all come from somewhere? I mean, do you kind of dig into that? You must dig into some of that, yeah.
Yeah, where I focus the most with that is where I ask, like, where do you find yourself editing your story? Like, where are you steering the conversation away from that one piece of information that you don't want anyone to know about? Where are you editing, or where are you spinning your story so that you don't have to talk about that one thing? And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go on a PR campaign and offer every piece of our dirty laundry, or let every single skeleton out to every single person we ever meet. That's not what I'm saying. But when we spend a lot of energy editing and managing our story or our perspective, that's the indicator that there's some growth to do in that particular area, whether it's bringing more attention to it, and maybe it is therapy, maybe it is talking to a particular person in your life that it affects, but just kind of coming clean about it, because again, in that isolation and the wanting to keep it apart from the rest of us, it becomes a greater and greater sense or source of shame, which is always the thing that's going to hold us back.
Can you share a couple of examples of things that people have edited out that they needed to bring back into their story?
So for one, as it relates to a business, maybe there was a bankruptcy or a massive failure that they don't want maybe in potential investors or partners or employees or customers to know about. And so rather than saying, we went through this thing and then there was this bankruptcy and now we had to come over and build from scratch, it's, it wasn't the right fit. And they edit out this huge piece of information. And again, it's not, I'm not saying you have to go out and be on this huge PR campaign and let a skeleton out of the closet. However, when you're editing out of self-preservation because you feel like you're going to lose respect, or you feel like these, your relationship with these people is conditional on this piece of information, it creates a scenario where you're having to spend so much time and so much energy managing that to keep that piece of information out. And so rather than using the energy there, just being honest with it.
So I'm thinking out loud here, but it sounds like a useful question for people listening to contemplate is asking themselves, are the things I edit out of my story, my life story, when I'm relaying to people where I come from and what I do. And I imagine obviously you'd have to do some digger deeping. Can you give us one personal example, not from you necessarily, but like you gave a business example of bankruptcy, but something that someone had edited out of his or her personal past story that was, they were doing it for self-preservation, but it wasn't helping them grow or progress?
Yeah, so my personal story is I realized where I was editing, and it wasn't necessarily editing, but I had a really good spin on being a single mom. Mm-hmm. And for the first 7 years, maybe even 8 years of my divorce, I would not even say the word single mom. Like, I would never say I'm a single mom because I had shame around it. Mm-hmm. And so my story was, I don't relate to the story of a single mom, because to me, single moms, are women who are struggling, and they have no time for themselves, and they're just, exhausted and totally depleted, and I don't relate to that. So I had in my mind a spin on it. And when I realized, like, I have shame around that term, not because I am a single mom, but because I felt like as a mom, and I share custody with my kids, like, I had shame around, like, I'm not going to have my kids this weekend. Like, what kind of mom is without her kids on the weekend? Mm-hmm. And so I just always had this spin around it. And for what? I mean, it's great that my kids get to spend so much time with their dad. We have 50-50 custody. Like, it's amazing that they have a dad that they get to spend so much time with. It's amazing that I also now have time to focus on myself and grow my business. And because my kids are athletes, I still get to see them at their games every weekend mm-hmm. when they're not with me. And so what that did, it took the burden off of me, but what it also did is it made me stop overcompensating with my kids, like feeling like, oh my gosh, I only have half the time with you. Like, I have to squeeze all of these things into the time that we do have. Like, it just went, oh my gosh, like, I'm a really great mom. And so when I wasn't coming from a place of feeling like I needed to overcompensate for all of this time that we were losing together, mm-hmm. it made me so much more present to them. And so many of my coaching clients that I'm working with, when I started having this conversation, they're like, yes, like, I have that. And it's hard to say. And I think particularly for a woman who's, a lot of times our identities get wrapped up as into being a mom. So that was a big one for me. And it realized where I was punishing myself in other areas. So
Kelly, how did you get that aha moment?
I was at a retreat, and I was talking with another woman, and I qualified one of my desires. I said, it was a spiritual retreat, and I was like, I probably shouldn't say this. It's a little worldly to have my attention on some of these smaller issues at on a spiritual pursuit. And she said, there's your block. You have shame. And I was like, what? Mm-hmm. She was like, anytime there's judgment, anytime you have judgment on yourself or others, it's somehow connected to shame. And I was like, I don't think I have shame. And she's like, okay. Hmm. And by the end of the weekend, I was like, oh, yeah. And so, where we have judgment on ourselves or others is another good indicator to trace it back to that, that source of shame. And, so I want to say that after I had this experience, I came back and I was talking to my clients about it, and they're like, I don't really know what to do with you right now, Kelly, because all of my work is, to my point earlier, about desires, and it's about co-creation, and it's about what we want. And so my flavor of coaching always tends to be very positive, and it always tends to be towards the light. And now I come back and I'm like, all right, we're going to talk about shame. And they're like, wait, what? And, I could feel them squirming, like, this isn't your brand of coaching that I'm looking for. Yeah. And so here's what I offer, if this is our set point, this is our set point. If we want to grow this far, we are humans. Like, we have so much duality. We also have to be able to look back into the shadows as deep as we want to expand, because we expand in relation to each other. So we can stay here, and you can keep we can keep the shadow box here, but we're only going to be able to get so far into what's possible with our progress if we're not willing to move, both of these scales together. relative to each other. And, I said, we'll keep talking. I just look at it, look where you're editing, look where there's judgments. When you start to feel ready to talk about it, we'll go there. And so when I give them that perspective and set that expectation, they have a new context for how to talk about it. And
forgive me if I missed something you were just saying, but I was trying to think about how do you start that, not the conversation, but how do you announce to couples that you're working with that one of the important topics that needs to be figured out is what are we editing? In other words, is that kind of a standard question you have when you work with couples?
It is now. This was a relatively new discovery for me. So it is now. And so when I say, are you editing that? My clients understand that because they have the language around it now. And so when I had that experience, when I came back like that next week, the next time I talked to my clients, I told them like, here's what I learned, here's some more things to process. And so some people, and especially because I came and I told my personal story, probably 4 or 5 of the women that I was working with were like, yes. And one is now a grandmother, she raised her daughter as a single mom years and years ago. And she was like, I never realized that I was still carrying it now. Even though my daughter has kids, like I'm a grandmother now, and I still have had that source of shame in me all of these years.
I really want to go on this. And by the way, I've never gone on a rant on this podcast, but I'd love to go on one about how our society makes labels, because some of them are just so outrageous. But I won't. What the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, I'm assuming that most couples come to you because clearly they know they've got work to do, and I'm guessing many aren't in the best place. Otherwise, presumably they'd see no need in meeting with you. Where I'm going with this is, when I've been at that point in my own life and I think about desires, my desires are always low. In other words, it's hard for me to get ambitious and excited and dream big because I'm sort of in an emotional funk. And I remember feeling that way, probably wasn't that long ago, but it feels like it was a few years back. In other words, I felt like I knew what to do, but I just couldn't muster the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But point is how do you address couples or even individuals where you can tell they're holding back on their desires because their desires are so modest and small?
I meet them where they're at. And so I think the worst thing we can do is start way down the field and just, keep, come on, hurry up. Like, I meet them where they're at. And so sometimes the first call or two is, yeah, it's okay. Like, and to your point, like a lot of times one of the people in the couples is like, I don't even know what I want. I know this isn't it, but like, I don't even know what direction to start facing. And so early on, we're just trying things on. Like, does this feel right? Does this feel right? And I think one of my gifts is that I have a really strong intuition in that I can hear where there's potential. It's kind of like this auditory, like I'm pressing. And when there's something that I can hear in my clients where I know where I can go deeper. And that's why I meet them where they're at. And I have a lot of focus on the words that they're using. And I can tell when I'm getting there because I always say, like, if you can't talk about your purpose or your desires without a lump in your throat or a tear in your eye, you're not there yet. And so I just keep, it's a gentle, easy massage back until we get to the point where there's a silence. And I don't even know if this is a thing, but this is what I've always wanted to do, and they start to go down that trail. And so it's a process of just, it's an unravel, It's a safe space. There's no right or wrong answers. I use a lot of stories, whether it's from my own personal background or some of my clients, because I feel like that's a good way for them to connect. And I can tell when they're latching on to something, if it's a good place for me to keep going deeper with them.
I mean, clearly from your background, when you said, you work with Strategic Coach and then Lifebook, and now you're working in this role with your own company, working with couples and speaking all over the place. well, this is my slow way to ask the question, really, I suppose, because but I mean, clearly you've always been really interested in learning and growing and helping other people do the same. What's your driving purpose now that you're running your own business?
For my business?
Well, purpose,
broadly
speaking.
Yeah. What has me really fired up right now and really excited is everything that went down last year with Me Too and, the feminine rising and this dramatic shift that we're feeling with women is really exciting to me. And it's exciting to me because I have I think a forward perspective of it, in that I see the pendulum swinging in the other way, and that maybe now we're going to start trampling our men, and in 20 or 50 years the men are going to have their Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And so being able to work with entrepreneurial women and helping them with their relationships, and this is where I get into my first marriage, when I was the driver, really ambitious, and all the things that led to my divorce in that particular relationship, helping women understand the role of who we actually are as women and how powerful it is, and not misusing that power. I think we have these magic, powerful, potent swords of creation, and I think if we're not careful, we use them as destruction instead of wands. And when I talk about the power of a woman and breathing life into her spouse, and coaching them on how men will fill the space that we give them, that's really exciting to me. And I remember the first time I was asked to speak at a women's financial conference. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to be speaking to a room full of alpha females. And I remember I wrote this work basically for wives of entrepreneurs. So yes, I wrote the program for women, but it was a very different demographic than female financial advisors.
Okay, yeah.
And so when they asked me to speak, I was like, I don't think they're going to like my message. And she was like, we need this because one of the rungs on the ladder to success for women is divorce. And she's like, my role in this financial company is, bringing women up through the ranks. And all of them are like up against a divorce conversation. Some of them are going through with it, some are not. But like, there are very, very few that are satisfied in their relationship. And so I was like, okay, I'll talk, but you've been warned. I can't guarantee that this is going to be a home run with your audience. And so when I went and I gave my keynote and I talked about my experience, no one left the room afterward, to the point where 2 hours later, I was sitting in a chair with the rest of them, and it was like this huge girl talk of just this conversation with the women of what happens to us as we rise, and making sure that we're keeping space for our men to do the same. That's really, really re-energized my work and the conversations that I'm having.
So you coaching more A-type women now then?
The A-type women that I coach are in groups. I have a weekly group that I meet with them in groups. My one-on-one personal coaching is all of them are entrepreneurial male, and the woman is either also an entrepreneur or a spouse, whether she's a stay-at-home or has her own job, but maybe not career-focused or purpose-driven.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating dynamic. It's funny, I can't help but think of my own marriage as well as we go inside, but that's not really the purpose of the podcast. Common landmines obviously are some things you help people with. So can you talk about, one or two of the most common landmines or challenges that you see between that face the entrepreneur and the spouse, and please throw out some percentages in terms of, obviously you're not just, really always talking about the male being the entrepreneur, because that's absurd and not true. So feel free to share which way that goes. But basically, what are the biggest challenges that you see the couples facing? Because again, I'm sure most of the listeners can full well relate.
So the one that's universal, doesn't matter who's the entrepreneur, but for most entrepreneurs, the things that make us really successful in business can be really hard to live with at home. So the things that make us successful in business: we're driven, we're passionate, we have an eye for excellence, we're committed, we have a lot of connections and relationships, we're creative, we're maybe a little bit chaotic. And so all of those qualities serve us really well in business, and maybe even we get a lot of appreciation or applause or recognition for those qualities in business, and then we get home and our passion is anger, or our creativity is chaos or mania, or our eye for excellence is perfectionism or OCD. Our connections and relationships take away from our family. And so they're working for us well in business, but they're not necessarily contributing to a healthy, happy household at home. And so there tends to be a lot more criticism at home. So I have a conversation about the compliment to criticism ratio, because yes, like if we're causing chaos at home or we're causing upset at home, it should be addressed. And it also, especially when I work with groups of men entrepreneurs, they're like, yeah, maybe I do get a lot of recognition or accolades at work or in the public, but the only vote of approval that I want is for my wife. And she's like, I don't want to make your head any bigger. The last thing you need is another compliment. And they're like, I'm like striving so hard, I just want her approval. And so that is one common. It's actually where I start out of the gate is what is the compliment to criticism ratio? How much are we tearing each other down in the marriage with our criticism or our complaints versus complimenting each other? And like when we start to see the good, because what we appreciate appreciates. So when we start to look for the good qualities in our partner and speaking into what's working, we get more of that. And so it's that again, that transitional habit of changing the dynamics of making sure that, yes, if there's a complaint that you have to lodge, still lodge it, but also make sure that you're speaking into what is working and what you do appreciate about one another.
Mm-hmm. And then what about the, because I was looking at your website, that the things that you specifically help the spouse with, and certainly you talk about that many of those people feel like they've lost their sense of self. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because that's presumably a completely different conversation than the one you're going to have with the entrepreneur, correct?
Absolutely. So when I work with a spouse, this is typically somebody who has maybe left her career or hasn't been engaged professionally in a long time, and her concern is, when am I going to have to go get a job now, and I don't know how to turn this passion or this hobby that I have into a business. Or my husband recognizes that I'm a really great designer and he's trying to monetize it, and my whole thing is like, wherever you take this, that's up to you. But what I really focus on is what came factory installed in you. There are a lot of amazing qualities that are present in you still. They might be dormant, but you got here to this life with them. And so I want to look at her independent from her kids, independent from her husband and his business and her social circle. Like, who are you at your best with your emotions, intellectually, spiritually, your health and fitness? Like, the things that are happening within you that are unique to you, let's get those back online. And so I have them just kind of take an inventory of everything that they're spending their time on. And then I have them rank it. Like, when you look at all of these things that you're doing in your life on a day-to-day basis, are they generally things that you love, things you enjoy, things you tolerate, or things you dread? Mm-hmm. And so when, just like a food log, when you're seeing everything staring you back in the face, when they have an energy log or a time log, it's like, gosh, no wonder I'm feeling so depleted. Like, all of these things are activities that I'm basically either tolerating or dreading. And so it's like, okay, let's figure out a way to get these off your plate so that we can create space for things that you do love and enjoy. And if you don't know what those are, like, that's our work together, is to figure out what those are. So we create the space first for more passion and purpose to come online, because I believe our passion lives in us. I think when people start to look for purpose, they're looking outward. And my work is, let's look inside. Like, what's inside? Like, where's your heart trying to take you? Because again, that's desire, right? And look at that word, desire. Desire of the Father. Like, I believe it's a spiritual pursuit to really focus on those, because I know our desires get us to where we're supposed to be.
Actually, it's a perfect transition, because it brings us back to play a little bit. It does in my mind, because I didn't come back to it when I said I would, but also the book you wrote, incorporates these three themes. So first off, can you talk a bit more about play? Because it's funny, again, I see that word and it's a terrible social sort of mindset. Also, I want to say social stigma, but the notion that somehow play is frivolous and, something that children get to do, but not grown-ups that are supposed to be building a business. But you talked about how kind of pivotal that is to the relationship getting started, which again, I loved the way you talked about that, because it struck me as so true. And especially when kids come, they're so consuming that it's the first thing that goes.
Right.
So anyway, can you talk a little bit more, I suppose, about, I guess in a way, about how you sort of maybe not stumble, but how you realized why that's so important?
Yeah. So I don't know I don't actually think this is relevant, but I actually majored in recreation in college. And it was because I was, in college, it was time to pick a major. And I'm like, I don't want to do any of these things. And I thought about it, I'm like, nobody really does what they major in college anyway. So if I'm going to get a degree, I'm going to have fun doing it. So I majored in recreation. And it took me to some really fun places. But then when I started, getting serious and looking for my real job, that's when I came to Strategic Coach. And I actually came to them through a headhunter, and she was like, I found this position. It's a company that sets up workshops for entrepreneurs. And I was like, no, I'm going to be in a sterile convention hall assembling trade show booths. She's like, and I was like, but you know what? I need a practice interview, so I'll go anyway. And as soon as I walked into Strategic Coach, it was my mothership. The interview hadn't even started yet. And I was like, I don't know what happened here, but I'm not leaving until I have an office. And what I learned in that interview was that they were basically like a university for entrepreneurs. And their tagline, and this is one of the things I really liked when I walked into the office, was work less, make more. So people are flying in from all over the world. They're writing checks to be part of this program to understand work-life balance. It's a foundational concept in their program. And so the very first workshop, the goal of the purpose of the workshop is to help clients set out their schedule for the next quarter. And their homework is their assignment in the workshop is to figure out how many free days they want in the next 90 days. Free days by definition, 24 hours, midnight to midnight, no work-related activities. Okay. So they're there and they're like, some are like, I want 2 free days. Some are like, I want 12, I want 20. Everybody has it's not a prescription. Everybody finds their own number that they want. So they leave the workshop now and they have 90 days to integrate. They have 90 days to meet their goal of free days. So they go out, they have their quarter. The next quarter they come back for their workshop, and it was like, okay, great. How was your quarter? Everything the team was okay. How were your free days? And it was like everyone gets real shifty, and we're like, oh gosh, what happened? Did your assistant call? No. Check your email? Nope. Oh, you picked up a business journal and you got sucked into business thinking? No, that didn't happen. Well, what happened? Why didn't you get your free days? Kelly, they sucked. As soon as my family found out I was home, it was like, fix the sink, cut the grass, run the carpool. It was no fun. I would have rather been at work. Or as soon as I got home, my spouse or partner was like, well, I never get a free day. You do all this. I'm going out. I didn't get to spend time with my family anyway because my partner took the free day. And so that's when I realized, so they're going back to work because the free days weren't fun. And that's when I got it, because as entrepreneurs, we get to experience flow states. Just like Michael Jordan, any elite athlete or musician or artist, we can get into a flow state where we totally lose track of time. We create really great results with very little effort. It activates all of the same brain chemistry centers in our brains that narcotics do. It literally gives us a high, and that's how we become workaholics, because it feels really good over here where we get to produce and get into the zone. And so when we're at work or at home and we have to, be in taskmaster mode, of course we'd rather be at work. And so what I know is that play puts us in the same brain space as flow. We lose track of time. We get great results with little effort. We have fun. We learn. Like, that's why children learn through play. It doesn't change. There's no point in our life where our learning capacity through play changes. It's always still there. And I saw a study. It was like, it took 144 repetitions to learn something new in an academic setting versus 4 repetitions in a play setting for somebody to really get it. And that continues through adulthood. And so play is another way to get into a flow state and keep the time away from work as enjoyable as our time at work. And so the more I thought about that, the more I just, I always pick up tidbits about play and its utility. And I read a book, I think it was Matthew Kelly, and he talks about carefree timelessness, and he's the one that talks about love growing in that space. And so when you look for it, because I have so much appreciation for it, I'm always picking up more and more tidbits about the importance of it. And it's where our kids connect to us. Like, it's where our kids know that we're part of their lives, and they, if they trust us with the little thing about watching Paw Patrol or whatever, like, they're going to start trusting us with the big things, because little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. They're going to start to trust us with the bigger things when we've been able to play in their sandbox. The same is true with our spouse.
I feel rather silly standing here because I took strategic coach for 2 years and I completely missed that point altogether. But maybe it was, I don't know if it was brought up or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously the 3-day piece was covered, but not the piece about the play and flow and so on and connecting those dots.
Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah.
I understood that after going through strategic coach. So you didn't miss anything. That's something that those are the dots that I was able to connect through my work.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. I'm conscious of time here. Can you talk a little bit about praise? You've sort of talked about purpose, but we haven't talked much about praise. You've mentioned it, but can you say again where? I mean, since it's one of the 3 main, sections for your book.
Yep.
Again,
so
where does the value there come, or what prompted you to focus on that topic?
So in my relationship, my partner always told me, like, your appreciation, your validation makes me feel bulletproof. Like, as long as I know you're behind me and you believe in me, I feel like I can do anything. So I saw him come to life through my praise and recognition. And one of the other pieces about praise is that it really is like a foundational piece to our intimacy. Because when you look at intimacy, into me you see, when we can speak into the good things and the divine things that we see in our partner, it increases a sense of intimacy in terms of being seen and appreciated. Because again, it's especially after a long relationship together, it can be really easy to point out the flaws. We know exactly what buttons to push. And I think we lose attention or the sense of significance of really being able to speak into what we see in our partner. And so it's always funny. It's always another funny conversation, because sometimes if I'm running a men's retreat, they'll be like, Kelly, I try and compliment her. I try and like appreciate her, and she's like shuts it down, like, oh, whatever, you don't know. And the women that I work with, it's like sometimes they don't feel worthy, sometimes they feel like they have to qualify it, sometimes it's just not the right way that they want to be appreciated. And so there's always a joke like it, he comes home, he's like, you look great in those yoga pants, and wants to rub my thigh or something. But I also just taught our kids how to read or drive, or, I also did this really amazing thing with my mom, and that's what I really want to be seen for. Mm-hmm. And that's a great conversation to talk to your spouse. It's okay if you don't know. A lot of people don't even know what their best compliment that they want to receive is. So really thinking, like, what do I really want to be appreciated for? Like, what's the highest compliment someone can give me? And when we understand that in our partner, we start to see more and more of it. And that's a turn on, right? Like, seeing your partner in his or her element is an aphrodisiac. Like, it is such a point of attraction. And so when we know what our partner really wants to be recognized for, and we start to see that, it's another way that, it loops into that intimacy cycle.
That makes it makes a ton of sense. In fact, it's funny because, yeah, again, I clearly I don't think about this enough, but you talk about, the power of play, and also playing together as a couple, but then appreciating what people most want to hear. Of course, that makes people feel more loved, and then connecting it to having, you talk about co-creating and purpose and all these other things as well that build a relationship better. It makes enormous sense. So what, I mean, just briefly, what kinds of things, how do you want to make a difference moving forward?
I want to keep reminding couples that they can create whatever they want, whenever they want. That's why I love working with the entrepreneurial demographic, because they have the time and resource freedom that maybe their counterparts who are employees don't have. And I just want to keep maximizing that freedom for them. Love is such a powerful, powerful elixir, and it's rocket fuel for not only for our families, but for our businesses as well. And I think, that was one thing that I really noticed also working at Strategic Coach, was my clients who would talk about their wives or husbands in a very affirmative way, and, oh, I couldn't do this without him or her. Those clients always just had a different level of holistic success versus the clients who are like, oh, I can't do this, my husband's going to be mad, or I can't do this because my wife's not going to let me do it, or, there's always some kind of marital grit. Mm-hmm. I just always sensed a different degree of hitting that ceiling of complexity. And so really understanding that taking care of the marriage and my own divorce, by gosh, like that alone was motivation enough to really help people understand how to take care of each other better. And I want to keep reading into that, and I want to keep reminding powerful women that they can and should have a really powerful man by their side, and they can help bring that out in their partner regardless of where he is right now, with the right mindset and with the right tools. I'm really, really excited about the whole notion of two extraordinary people, one extraordinary relationship. I think somewhere along the way we agreed that there could only be one star, and I think that has come at a cost to the partner of the entrepreneur. And, maybe you don't have to have a huge following or platform, but you can still be a star in your own right, and helping them rediscover that is what I'm really excited about. Yeah,
no, that's really inspiring. So just to wrap up with three quick questions. The first one is, who do you think you've become since that day when you said your partner felt like he'd lost the real Kelly?
I'm a different Kelly. There's definitely not a start over. I'm leaps and bounds where I ever was when we met. Creative, confident, curious, empowered. I just really find myself really looking to just suck all the marrow out of the bones of life. I'm a lot less timid or scared, so I'm definitely in a fuller expression of myself, and I keep looking for the edge of that.
I love it. And what would be a good first step for people listening that definitely want to get more onto that journey?
It's funny, people always want like the magic pill, and bring this home and share it with your spouse or partner if they haven't seen it yet. Just let the conversation come up. There isn't a right or wrong, and just whatever's true for your partner is true for your partner. Let them be okay with that, and let there be space for that. Have the conversation come up, like, where can we do better with our play? Like, what do we want to do? A lot of times that's like, I don't even know where to start. Like, what do we do? And that's the fun part. You get to dabble until you find the thing that you love to do. Talk about the compliment to criticism ratio. Talk about what you want to be seen for. It's a really great platform to just start having these questions. It's a lot better than, what did you do today? How was your day? Where's Johnny's homework? This is some of the way that we get out of those typical conversations.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, right. Ask better questions. I love it. And then lastly, how can people keep in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Probably my website is the best. I'm really liking just being able to talk to my email list about the things that are on my mind. I find there's more intimacy there. I get to say, be a little bit more free with my voice without all of the noise on social media. So going to my website, there's a chance to opt in for my newsletter, and it's all value. Like, it's talking about what's happening in my coaching conversations that week, or other new breakthroughs that I've had. So that's the best way is via my website.
Okay, and can you spell your website address for those listening, please?
Yes, it's The Entrepreneur, TheEntreprenewer. So the word renew is at the end of it.
Got it. So The Entrep, as in entrepreneur, but then the rest of it is, REN, renew. So entreprenewer.com. So theentrepreneur.com. Otherwise, they can also Google your name, Kelly Clements, entrepreneur.
You got it.
Too, right? And that helps as well. And are there any other social media links that you want to mention, or are you saying your best place to start is on your website?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, all under Kelly Clements.
Okay.
And there's daily tidbits there that my assistant does a really good job of taking little tidbits that she picks up when working with me and keeping things active there. So certainly find me on social media as well.
That's brilliant. So Kelly, thank you so much for sharing this. It's a fascinating subject, and it's funny because it doesn't come to my mind as sort of business first, but then, as you say, it's almost impossible to be effective in life if you don't have good things going on at home. And so it's time for many people probably to spend more time focusing on that piece. And I couldn't help but notice you talking also about the people that seem to get the best results in business as well were the ones that had a lot of things working well. It just makes complete sense. It's the same as health, really, I suppose, too. You can't live in silos. So it sounds like you're a fantastic resource for anybody looking for ways to improve in those areas, not just with coaching, but I mean, I know you do workshops, and also you speak at different engagements as well. So conferences, companies, those types of things as well can also be a great starting point, certainly to get more education. Plus Kelly's book. So the book link is the best book link. Is that Amazon, or is that on your website too?
Amazon is the best link for it, and it's The Power of Play, Praise, and Purpose. This is the copy of it. Got it.
The Power of Play, Praise, and Purpose. Kelly Clements. Fantastic. Thank you. So thanks again, Kelly. I'm just going to wrap things up with the audience here for those listening. So again, thank you so much for listening, everyone. I'm sure you got some fantastic insights too, and great questions and things and ideas of ways to, improve relationship matters for yourself and your life in general. I suspect too, I think there were some personal development things that all of us can work on our own as well. And otherwise, again, I always like to caution, don't put anyone on a pedestal. None of us are perfect. Start where you are. No one's perfect in all areas. So please just kind of, move one step at a time. But don't listen to Kelly and feel like, I can never be as accomplished as her or do the things she's done. Again, we all can do so far much more than what we probably think we can. And otherwise, please subscribe to my podcast if you haven't already. Please leave a review. That really helps a lot too. And then the show notes for today are on my website at matt-anderson.com, matt-anderson.com. It'll be /Kelly Clements. And with that, thanks again, everyone. And I'll wrap up with my final question, which is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm Matt Anderson, and this is The Road Not Taken.